Lots of people love Christmas, but many think that the Christmas story that's found in the Bible is just some sort of kind of holy fairy tale. It's not really based on any actual historical event. But is it? The book of Luke was written as a historical fact. It was written as more than just a story. And for the purposes of this conversation, I'll focus on the book of Luke because it's Luke's gospel that many people use as the basis for the Christian Christmas story. So, who was Luke? Well, Luke was from Antioch, which was just a little jut of land in what is now central Turkey. And he was highly educated. He worked as a doctor. The book in the Bible that he wrote and that carries his name serves as a record of the life of Jesus Christ. And the other book that he wrote, Acts, serves as a record of the early church. So I think an interesting question is, why would a doctor take it upon himself to write a record of the life of Jesus? Well, at the beginning of Luke's gospel, he answers this question. He says, "Inasmuch as many have undertaken to compile a narrative of the things that have been accomplished among us, just as those who from the beginning were eyewitnesses," and that's a key word, eyewitnesses, "and ministers of the word have delivered them to us, it seemed good to me also, having followed all things closely for some time past, to write an orderly account to you, most excellent Theophilus, that you might have certainty concerning the things that you've been taught." That's Luke 1, verses 1 to 4. So we know that Luke was writing to a man named Theophilus. Theophilus was some kind of Roman official. We know that because Luke refers to him as most excellent Theophilus, and that's kind of a title reserved for officials in that day. And like others, Theophilus had heard loads about Jesus, but he wanted to know the whole story. So he commissions Luke to put together this account of what happened. So at this point, it's really important that we pay attention to the word that Luke uses to identify his source for the information found in the book of Luke. He calls them eyewitnesses, and the literal Greek translation would be original same viewers. So he's leaving absolutely no doubt that his versions of the event are not something that's been handed down from generation to generation to generation. You need to remember that he was writing this about 30 years after Jesus was on the earth, well within the lifetime of people who would have, walked around Jesus, talked to Jesus. These are the people who are Luke's source, the original eyewitnesses, the original same viewers. So from here, Luke goes on to talk about the events that lead up to the birth of Jesus, including how the angel Gabriel appeared to Mary, the mother of Jesus, who was a virgin, and Gabriel tells her that she's going to give birth to Jesus. And of course, this forms the basis of what the Christian Christmas story is, and the Christmas story that many of us know today. But how do we know it's actually true? How do we know that we can trust Luke as a historian? Well, in the late 19th century, an atheist archaeologist in England named Sir William Mitchell Ramsay, he was determined to disprove the historical accuracy of the New Testament. So Sir Ramsay was the first professor of classical archaeology at Oxford. So when it came to rating historians, this guy really, really knew his stuff. So he set off to modern-day Turkey and to Palestine to disprove the accuracy of the New Testament. He spent years preparing for the trip, and he was sure that he was going to find some really, really big holes in the historical accuracy of the New Testament, and specifically in the work of Luke. So he was going to be looking at the book of Luke and the book of Acts. But the interesting thing is that he was so struck later on, after he did all this research, that he actually ended up dropping his atheistic views and converted to Christianity because he was so convinced, as a professional archaeologist and historian. The guy, was a chair at Oxford. He knew his stuff. He was so convinced that Luke's writings, along with the other Gospels and the rest of the entire Bible, was true. And speaking about Luke, he's quoted as saying, "Luke is a historian of the very first rank. Not merely are his statements of fact trustworthy, this author should be placed among with the very greatest historians." So anybody would say that this is a ringing endorsement for Luke's credibility as a historian. So Ramsay isn't alone. There are many other archaeologists, many other historians who hold the same view. Historians work in a field that is obsessed with evidence. They don't make a name for themselves just going on feelings or emotions. They'd be out of business pretty quick. They search for facts. Sir Ramsay believed the evidence supporting the historical credibility of Luke's writings was overwhelming. And if Sir Ramsay was right, and I absolutely believe he was, then any claim that Luke's gospel is just a story, a giant, moral, or just a story that's only interested in ethic and not interested in historical accuracy. Anybody who makes that claim and saying that Luke's book is just that, it's just a life lesson, well, they're not being true to the evidence. They're not being true to the author's intent. Luke intended for this to be a historically accurate narrative. So Luke never intended for us to see Christmas as well as just a story. He wrote it about the birth of Christ as he heard it from the eyewitnesses, that word, the original same viewers. And he wrote it as a historian, dedicated to the accuracy of his work, and not as just some author trying to conjure up some grand story, just to sell books. He was writing his letter to one man. If he was in it just for the profit, he would have written it, to a huge, wide audience. He was writing it to one man, and he was writing it as a historically accurate account of the life of Christ. So this Christmas, when you hear the Christmas story, what position are you going to take? Are you going to dismiss what the Bible says about Jesus just as a story, some sort of holy fairy tale? Or are you going to agree with Sir William Ramsay, the world-renowned Oxford archaeologist and historian who devoted his life to, at first, trying to poke holes in the historical accuracy of Luke's writing, but then ended up devoting his entire life to supporting them and ending up following Jesus, the one who Christmas is all about?